thank you so much for your full participation in the morning session of the biodiversity tour. Mwami Slight, Febani, Sanyo Toyanze Gesebo, Ukubeera ng'otulambuza ennime y'obutonde. We thank you for taking us through the agroecological way of farming. These youths have learned a lot. Most of them had never seen what they have seen today. Most of them have learned a lot. The seeds have been shared, the trees have been planted, and it was interesting to have participants going through all your garden, and they ended up going through the forest. Actually, they even had to fetch firewoods, which we are going to use for our campfire. So if it was not the forest, would we get those firewoods? So right now, we are going for another session, which is going to be short because we need to handle some few activities before the day closes. But before we even go any further, I would wish that we can have our event officially opened by the chairperson LC1.
Tutwaleyo kone emisize isimbeyo, tutwaleyo kone ku mayuuni. Bananga amanya agange mbadde mu katemba walire kati nvuddeyo. Amanya agange nze Demba Kisozi John. Nze Kiyamani wa Lugala LC1. Eno area gye muliko bagiyita Lugala LC1. Banange mwebale kujja okutuddizawo bino ebyobuwangwa ebyedda.
The woman councillor of this parish Lugala and the vice chairperson of this sub-county C. I'll come all my colleagues from Kenya, my brothers and sisters from Rwanda, my sisters and brothers from Tanzania, and all of you from wherever you have come from. Thank you very much for coming. As we are indigenous, let me go also indigenous. Sansanyo balaba basebo ne banyabo mwenna okuva gye muvudde. Ab'ekitundu kino mwebale nnyo okutweyungako naye okusinga ennyo nyongera okwebaza gurupu eyo mukulu Semwezi Slight mwava okwongera okutunda bukunja. Ekyamazima mukulu Slight otutuuze era olwaleero wonna kati tumanyiddwa mu nsi yonna nti ebukunja wakiriko newankubadde tumazeewo obutonde bw'ensi oba tugezaako bulwanyisa naye ate mukyalimu abatonotono abatasobola okubuwanirira. Webale nnyo ssebo, webalire ddala n'ekibiina kyo ekya Bukunja Organic Farm League. Olwaleero nga slow food n'ebitongole bino byebitugaseeko olwaleero mukoze omulimu gw'amaanyi nnyo okwongera okugatta ku butonde bw'ensi. Ekyamazima olwaleero obutonde bw'ensi bumaliddwawo naye bwe muyita mu kubuzaawo nga muyita mu bavubuka ekyamazima kikulu nnyo mwebalire ddala. Sina bingi nnyo byakwogera okuggyako okwongera okubazzaamu amaanyi nti ekyamazima muli ku mulamwa.
I welcome Danniel from Agroecology Fund, and he will be telling us more about his work, and maybe we shall be having now a conversation. So this one is going to be a food talk. We are going to be discussing about food youth participation in agroecological food system, and we want not to be like a speech, but it's going to be a food talk. So we are having a donor perspective. What do donors say? You people know about Agroecology Fund. It is a fund which is working to promote agroecology worldwide. They are going to be explaining us more about agroecology. So if we are youths, and also those who were youths before, because no one here has never been a youth. if we are youths and we have ever been youths before, how have we participated in agroecological food systems? What do you think we can do to do this? We are going to be discussing all this. So I call upon active participation, interject wherever you can. You can ask questions.
To our political leaders, community members, thanks for welcoming us, and thanks for hosting us, and everyone, wherever you came from, thanks for being here. This is a food talk. We are not going to spend a lot of time, but just to go through some issues. I have with me my colleague, Danniel. We work a lot with Danniel. Like John said, I'm an advisory board member of the Agroecology Fund. It's one of the donors of Slow Food Uganda, Slow Food Kenya, Tanzania, Congo, and other organizations which are promoting and pushing for agroecology. Danniel will tell us more about his work. I'm happy that...
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you so much to everybody for having me here as a visitor. I bring you warm greetings from the Agroecology Fund, and I'm from the United States of America, and we can talk a little bit about the United States food policy, because I think that's relevant to the conversation. But just to say, I'm from that country, and it is a great privilege, really. The reason that we exist as the Agroecology Fund is to work to fund, to help provide resources for exactly the kind of work that you do. So it's really a deep honor to have the occasion, even for a very short time, to exchange with you. And I'm very honored to be part of a youth camp because I am not a youth. And so it's a great privilege to be amongst young people that are working to change the food system towards something much more sustainable, something based in rights, something based in rights of communities and nature, which is agroecology. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Danniel.
From really, I think it was maybe 30 countries or so. And we came together for a convening, a gathering of people that we called a gathering to speak about agroecological enterprises and territorial markets. So really what that means, that's a lot of words, but really we're looking to support small business people, entrepreneurs, people with interest in working to establish some kind of enterprise that will allow for them to make a dignified livelihood at the same time as they're feeding their communities, at the same time as they're caring for the environment. And so we were looking to understand really what is it that small business people, young men, young women, older people, cooperatives, community enterprises, what do they need to thrive? So I'd be actually very interested to hear from you. Maybe in a little bit we can ask some questions about that. Because I imagine some of you you're producing food, you're processing food, you're taking food to the market, you're cooking food, all of these things that have to do with a healthy food system. Who are you? What are the businesses you're creating, and what kind of help do you need? Because the important thing, and somebody asked about a donor, donors exist because there are some people in this world, unfortunately because of so much inequality, that have more resources than others, and it's the obligation of people with resources. I come from a very wealthy country, and we have some very wealthy people that provide us with resources, but it's exactly to support you and to try to really even the playing field so that you have the resources that you need to thrive in the work that you do.
We talked about the territorial markets and the enterprises. You mentioned a few things about food processing, food producing. Could there be also space for entrepreneurs who are working on agroecological inputs?
Absolutely, yeah. And one thing that very troubling for me as somebody coming from the United States is my country is a manufacturer of agrochemicals. And I think if I went to some of the shops here, I would find all kinds of inputs. I'd find agrochemicals, I'd find fertilizers and pesticides. I'd even find seeds that come from my country for you to plant here in East Africa. That's absurd. Why is that? So obviously there's a lot of big business interests looking to make a profit off of your diets, off of your landscape. So I think, yes, I think it's critically important that this issue about having businesses to create your own fertilizers and your own insect repellents based on the inputs that you have available, to use your indigenous seeds so that you don't have to be dependent on some manufacturer for a genetically modified seed or a hybrid seed. So yeah, I think that's a really important part of business development, is to work on that issue about agricultural inputs.
Last night we had a discussion here at the campfire, and it was about challenges which people find when they want to take on sustainable agriculture, when they want to engage in sustainable food systems. And one of those challenges was inadequate resource allocation by the public institutions to youth-led initiatives in sustainable agriculture. They, in the end, they don't have enough capital to invest in their ideas. They don't have resources to secure land, and also they cannot come together in some cases. Could there be any, from the donor world, could there be any opportunities through which young people who are here and those who are out there could tap into the available donor resources? Is there any kind of advice you give to the young people here?
Yeah, and I think if I understand a little bit, I think it might be easier for the person that's growing sugarcane over there to export to wealthy countries, to get a loan, to get capital, to get the inputs they need for their work, than it is for those of you that are trying to form the basis of a healthy food system. So in terms of what some the people in my fund are seeking to do is to build a kind of capital fund so that there is opportunities for resources for the kind of initiatives that you're all undertaking. Now, I think that we can help some as donors, but there's a lot of need here, and I think that to become too dependent on foreign monies for that kind of capital probably isn't the most sustainable thing. The most sustainable thing is that there are institutions in East Africa, from the development banks, from the agricultural banks, from your own savings and loan programs that you can develop internally in your communities. So I think that, yes, it is our aspiration to help come up with that kind of capital so that you can have also fair terms of loans, so that you're not getting charged too much interest and not losing all your money in impossible relationships with lenders. But I also think, importantly, to provide, for donors like us, to provide funds for this kind of youth camp where you all learn about how the economy of food works and you become advocates, so that you can go down to your local bank or to the African Development Bank or to the Ministry of Agriculture or to the Ministry of Commerce and say, we need public programs to support this. We don't think it's right that you're subsidizing chemical inputs and foreign imported seeds. We think you should be allocating the public money in Uganda to help us small entrepreneurs. So I think it's both sides. I think it's providing you with support to do that kind of advocacy, and also providing you support for the seed capital you need for your work.
You as the last point of our discussion, you talked about youth after here to go and the importance of this youth camp to have the multiplier effect. Do you have any last words of like take home advice or request you would make to these young people who have come here when they go back home? What do you think the role they need to play?
Okay, I just want to say that I go to a lot of, well, I haven't been recently because of COVID, but I used to travel and have the opportunity to visit a lot of work of farmer organizations and consumer organizations and networks of people that care about the environment and a healthy food system. And to be honest, in many cases, I mostly come across people, my age and an aging farmer population, and we hear a lot about youth leaving the countryside to go to the city to seek opportunities because life is too difficult in the countryside and there's too much importation of food and not enough opportunities to make a good livelihood as you begin to start your families. So first of all, I just want to congratulate you, and I think that you're really an example. I really mean that sincerely. That I work across the world. I work in Brazil, in Mongolia, in Southeast Asia, and people are asking, how do we get the youth more involved in the work? So I think that's another question that I want to hear from you. You know, how have you done it? I mean, look, there are 100 youth here together thinking about these issues, trying to struggle with what do we need, how do we build the system that we need. So I'd say that you're really showing the future. You're really showing how to bring people together, and I think that the kind of ways that you're working on all the various aspects of it's not just about farming, but of course it is about food production. But as Eddie said, it's about producing, manufacturing the kind of inputs. It's about finding space in the local markets. It's about opening local cafes that are selling the food that comes from your farms and your neighbors' farms. So I think that to continue that kind of focus on solving the problems and building such a coalition as you seem to have done, just looking at the names of the organizations here and hearing about the Red Cross and the local authorities and World Vision and the Human Rights Organization, I think that's exactly the kind of coming together of various organizations, because in the end, food touches us all. So I just want to maybe close just by saying, you know, you're not alone in any way. I mean, I'm very privileged to have had the opportunity to get around the world and see some of these movements, but there is a cry, there are demands, there is well-organized movements around the world that are doing similar work to you. But again, I really hold I hold a great appreciation for the work that you do, because I think that this whole very difficult issue of how to revive youth involvement in the food system is critical, and I think you've come a long way, and I really look forward to all of us. What I'm going to learn here today, I look forward to sharing with the other organizations and movements that I visit around the world. So I just want to thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for this time.
I don't think that every small farmer comes over to the same institution. What are the collaborating institutions that the farmer would approach? Thank you.
My name is Irene from Global Youth Biodiversity Network, the Uganda chapter, and we are a youth consortium that advocate for biodiversity conservation. So I wanted to know if you have any alliance that unites youth, or in case you have a program that brings youth together, youth in restoration, in environmental restoration, or in case you have some support in terms of funding or partnerships. Are you open to collaborations?
For Slow Food Kenya, and as part of my work at Slow Food Kenya, I do communication for Slow Food Youth Network in Africa. And it has been our wish, together with KIWAGALO, to see that we have a very strong network of slow food youth. These are young people who promote the philosophy of, production of good food in good, clean and fair way. And it has not been easy. We have been trying to push this, I think, for the last 3 years. And our main goal is to have an umbrella organization, apart from, local slow food Uganda, local slow food Kenya. This should stand alone thing in Africa. Do you think it can work in a way that, as a donor, maybe stand as an umbrella of youth in Africa? Are there opportunity for collaboration and funding?
Here in Africa, research is so biased that it's mostly against agroecology. It is just based on conventional farming. And we have seen mostly the farmer-led research working. People are making their own research as farmers, and it works out. And I would want to ask Agroecology Fund, how far have you invested in research, agroecological research, mostly in Africa? Thank you.
Are you ready to go far from the African country, especially for the youth? Because the youth who are practically applied the agro-ecological so have many issues to tackle. What is your plan for the African youth?
Yeah, just to say that, we see that all the time, and if you look at the donor agencies and where they're putting their investment money, they put it into big research institutes, some academic, some affiliated with multilateral aid agencies, and they're all, very close to the agrochemical industry, and they're doing research about genetically modified organisms and inputs and high-yielding varieties, that kind of thing. And yes, very little that derives from the lived experiences of farmers that are working with their landscapes and the technologies at their disposal. So we actually have designed a very small initiative, something we call the Grassroots Evidence for Agroecology. And so we have this kind of other small grant program where we're providing some support. And actually, Slow Food East Africa has been participating to reflect on what is the evidence we have about the impact of transforming our food systems towards agroecological improvements. What is the evidence we have, and how can we present it in a way that's convincing to young people, to older farmers, convincing to district managers, convincing to the National Ministry of Agriculture. So I think it's really critically important that we balance out that bias that you say, and I think so that it's important that farmers have the capacity, farmers and consumers and people dedicated to agroecology have the resources they need to do their own research, but also to collaborate with so-called professional researchers, and to break through some of those biases. So yes, we have a small program to do that, and we're really happy that Slow Food has been participating with us. And we're trying to do that across the world so that we really generate a base of evidence that doesn't just come from these so-called objective scientists, but really comes from the aspirations and needs of the communities. So that's quickly on that. With regard to the other questions, which were all, I think, what all the questions had in common was, well, at the end of the day, how do we get more resources for our work, I think. And there was a couple of questions specifically about youth work, youth and biodiversity, work in building a stronger network of youth and agroecology across the African continent. I think the other gentleman specifically said about some of the producers and how to get financing for them as well, and how they join the collaboration. Well, I think that there's so many. I mean, we could talk for a long time about that. I mean, the Agroecology Fund. I'm going to be totally honest with you here. So we are a fund. We gather funds from wealthy foundations in the U.S. and Europe. So
this camp is within the pillars and the core values of Slow Food, where we work with people from the different backgrounds, different age groups, different communities, and where we respect diversity of the people. So youth are really important when we are to talk about the future of food, because the young people, everything we talk about the future of food is directly affecting the future of young people. So that's why we basically target young people to come together to discuss and forge a way forward, how to improve the food system, how to sustain their future, and how to demand for the policies which and the programs from the government and other institutions which are friendly to their work and also to their ideas. Young people come with a lot of ideas, they have a lot of creativity, but again, if we don't nurture into this youth, this energetic group, which makes 78% of this country, the population in Uganda, we're actually losing a point. So we need to focus on the majority. It's so unfortunate that the youth are the majority. They form 78% of the population in this country. But again, majority of the poverty, majority of the malnutrition, majority of the diseases and other problems which affect people, they concentrate in young people. We have a lot of young mothers who are struggling to feed their families, but when we look around, there are so many things which they can use to feed their families. So that's why we open these opportunities for people to discuss, young people to bring together ideas, to share experience, and also to follow up on the previous learnings which they have had. We are basically an organization that is working in agriculture, but not agriculture in general, but the agriculture of the future, the agriculture which the planet needs. That agriculture is agroecology. We are focusing more on that. The type of agriculture that can regenerate the planet, that we can use to correct the past mistakes, the green revolution done to this planet. So that is the agriculture, that is the food system which we are promoting, which we are fighting for, and also the food system which we are building. So it's really important to have the youth voice in designing the agriculture of the future, the agriculture that we need today. If we are talking about regenerating the planet, we need to talk about regenerating the people. And we can only regenerate the people who will fight for the planet, starting with the youth. But again, it has a human rights approach, because the rights of young people to access the productive resources, the right of young people to choose the food they want to eat should be upheld. The right of the young people to do the agriculture and be financed to do that agriculture which brings life back to the planet, that one should also be upheld. The right of indigenous youth, the other young people to learn and interact freely with peace, with freedom, with love to each other is also very, very important. And as Slow Food, we respect this human right when it comes to food and distribution of natural resources. Young people, one of the biggest problems is access to land. Many of them have no right to own land. They have no resources to help them access land which could be useful to the production. They have no access to finances. They have no access to technical knowledge or capacity which can help them build sustainable enterprises to take themselves and their families out of poverty. We are here to discuss those issues. We are here to discuss the issue of subsidizing youth-led sustainable initiatives, talking about youth access to organic markets. That's why we are here. But also connect dots. There are youth who are working on biodiversity conservation, there are youth who are working on sustainable energy, there are youth who are working on nutrition and diets, there are youth who are working in the health sector and human rights. So how do we build a holistic approach to the change we want to make in this country, to the change we want to make in the food system? We need all these people to design a way to achieve food sovereignty and food security in this country.
My name is Danniel Moss. I work with the Agroecology Fund. I'm visiting you from the United States of America. And the Agroecology Fund it's a funder to the work of Slow Food, East Africa, Uganda and Kenya, and Tanzania and the Congo as well. And what I've observed is that African agriculture, it has a very, very rich heritage of being based on so many important cultural traditions and caring for the landscape, and that over the course of decades, really since colonization, over the course of centuries, we've seen the agriculture increasingly diverted to exporting crops, big stretches of pineapple and sugarcane and palm oil directed towards the wealthy countries. And what I'm seeing here in Slow Food, in this youth camp where I'm visiting today, is seeing the youth thinking, oh, maybe this is not the way that agriculture should be, and maybe we should recover some of our ancestral traditions and use what we know about agroecology to grow enough food for our families so that we're properly nourished, and also to care for the climate, care for the biodiversity. So I'm really inspired. I come here today and I see these youth very much engaged with not leaving the countryside for the cities and seeking jobs in factories and manufacturing, but rather saying that they would like to make their livelihood in the countryside. They would like to grow food, they would like to process food, they'd like to gather it, sell it in markets, open restaurants, open cafes, build a livelihood based on the richness of Africa, the richness of the food traditions. So I come away very inspired, and I think that the African youth here are really showing the way forward towards a kind of food system that's not about just more and more grains, ears of corn or bushels of soy. It's really about balanced nutrition for families and a way to make a proper livelihood, a fair livelihood, such that they can raise their families, even the young people, thinking about their children and their grandchildren, as we live in this changing world, a changing world where the climate is making agriculture ever more difficult. But I think that the techniques that they're using here, based in agroecology, based in respect for Mother Earth, based in understanding natural processes, and working with consumers to think about what they're putting in their bodies, that we don't need the processed food that unfortunately my country is sending over here, but you can manufacture your own inputs, you can use your own indigenous seeds to build a healthy food system here in Africa.
Yes, there have been issues from them about on how to start. Some funders, the governments here, like even here in Uganda, even you, the funders, sometimes when you come in with funds, you look out for the big boys, those ones, the older ones who have chunks and chunks of farmland. For us youths here, unless you inherit land, you have no money to buy land enough for agriculture, for farming. What would be the advice for youths who really want to engage in farming but have no really enough to start with?
Well, you know, farming is a business, and farming requires capital, and farming requires resources like land and water and seeds, all of which can cost money. And so in the Agroecology Fund, we do our small part. We like to seed organizations. In particular, we like to seed movements and networks of people coming together from across different sectors: farmers, traders, sellers, conservationists, people interested in biodiversity, people interested in human rights to protect land rights and water rights for all. So we think that by coming together, there can build a kind of galvanize a kind of groundswell of force where we can put pressure on donors, frankly, where we can say to them, you know, we don't want your donation of food aid for disasters during drought. We want support to build our food system based on agroecology. And so we as a funder, we're really proud to support Slow Food and support the youth here at the youth camp. But really we want to encourage them to come together, be a strong voice, and to say to the international funders as well, whether it's in the UN system, the World Food Program, or whether it's in private foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or from any other funders from the African Development Bank, to say, please invest in the kind of agriculture that we want. Please help us acquire land. Please help us manufacture our inputs. Please help us get access to good markets. And don't invade our markets with all these foreign goods that make our agriculture less competitive. So I think it's a question of capital, yes, but it's also a question of policies, where we have to ask for public policies that really encourage this, so that it doesn't make the price of fertilizer imported from Russia or the United States cheaper, but that their agriculture from here can be competitive based on their local inputs and the richness they have in their environment. So I encourage that kind of investment, and we will do what we can as donors to provide that kind of investment, and we'll encourage our fellow donors to do the same, because there's been a lot of misguided, I would say, colonialist agricultural development that's been oriented towards trying to reshape the agricultural economies of Africa towards exporting goods for Western consumers, and that's not the way it should be. It should be African agriculture, African food system for Africans, African food sovereignty.
Yes, as we wind up, in Uganda here we've had discussion widely to do with the indigenous foods, crops, the seedlings, and those ones that are modified.
Those that are what?
And these ones that are modified. Where should we be headed? Yes. Indigenous versus modified genetics.
Yeah, I think we've seen over the last decades a real emphasis on the part of donors and on the part of development organizations, development banks, to try to push Western technologies, genetically modified organisms, chemical inputs into an environment, into the agricultural environment here. And what we've seen is a lot of farmer debt, a lot of dependency on these kind of inputs. And we have seen certain limited gains in productivity, but those gains then diminish over time as the seeds become weak. We've seen pest invasions, locust invasions due to the overuse of pesticides. We've seen the soil degraded from the overuse of chemical fertilizers. So I would say that the solutions really are to return in some fashion to the richness that exists in the ecosystem and the traditional knowledge of our ancestors, of your grandparents that know how to farm with the assets that Africa has. That's not to say there's not new learning, and we in the Agroecology Fund, we support Slow Food to do research, to look at what are the impacts of the agroecological techniques What are the yields? How do they, with what plants are they most compatible? How do you best build soil health? How do you manufacture local inputs into powerful fertilizers and insect repellents? So I'd say there's still a lot of research to do, but the research is best done by the farmers themselves to really support them in becoming scientists, to working with academics and others that have perhaps more professional training, but the solutions lie in the communities that know best about what their bodies need and what their environment can support to produce food.